Hi, my name is Joe Yarshin, and thank you for tuning in to Kick in the Rear podcast. The real estate investment review, the goal of this podcast is to review books related to real estate, business, and entrepreneurship to help you with your real estate journey. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome in to Kick in the Rear podcast, episode 25. My name is Joe Yarshin. Today on episode 25, we're going to be reviewing the book on negotiating real estate. Expert Strategies for Getting the Best Deals When Buying and Selling Investment Property by Jay Scott, Mark Ferguson, and Carol Scott. This is by Bigger Pockets Publishing, so it's one of their books again. I found that this is one of the more helpful books in real estate negotiating investment properties. So without further ado, let's get into it. The introduction does a good job explaining of how the book is organized and how a real estate negotiation typically flows. Beginning with, beginning with the planning, preparation, research, and building rapport phase goes into the the initial offer, which then turns into the bargaining, renegotiating, and the close. So in this intro, it discusses the planning, preparation, and research phase a lot. Building rapport and determining that motivation, making that offer, bargaining, renegotiating, and settling. So in chapter 1, it's an introduction to negotiation. What do they mean by negotiation? They give you a simple example on page 17, and then the different outcomes of negotiation. So there's the win-lose, the lose-lose, and the win-plus, according to page 18. Reminds me of The Office, if anyone's ever seen the episode where Michael Scott talks about the different outcomes in an HR format. So that's pretty funny. So in the negotiation strategies, there's the distributive competitive approach, the integrative collaborative approach, and then it discusses here how real estate negotiation is different. And in each chapter, it gives you a really relatable example. It says Tales from the Trenches. So on each Tales of the Trenches, it gives you a real life example of each concept in real time. So page 24, it says negotiate everything and examples of that. Taking action and then different best practices as well are located in all of these chapters. In chapter 2, principles of negotiation. So it goes into the negotiating mechanics. A big part of this book is the target point and the MAO, or the minimum acceptable offer. I'll just give you a brief, I'll show you what that looks like. It's got a really good visualization of what the seller's target is, the seller's minimum acceptable offer, the buyer's target, and the buyer's minimum acceptable offer, and how the area of agreement comes into play. Distance from agreement is explained, and then it discusses concessions, the currency of negotiation, and different types of concessions. So page 33, leverage and the power of circumstance is discussed, and then power, balancing between that, momentum, negotiations in motion, price and terms are discussed. And then successful negotiation equals solving problems. So chapter 3 immediately talks about the power of information, another Tales from the Trenches example, information about the market, talks about buyer's market versus a seller's market, information about the property, looking at different public records versus online community resources on page 47. I have that circled because there's some awesome information about the tax assessments, the property deeds, and public records, and different questions you can ask. And then continuing on to page 49, I have that circled as well. It talks about like zoning regulations and how questions you can ask as well. Talks about talking to neighbors at the property. There's some really good quick tips on page 50 and 51. It says nextdoor.com is the community-based social network, helps you learn about neighborhoods, keep them up to date about local issues. It even has gossip on there. On page 51, 3 magic words will encourage the other party to keep giving you information. Really? What else? Remember, people like to feel helpful. Let them know you appreciate the candor. So page 51 as well talks about the Department of Planning and Zoning and talking to contractors about permits, and then different Google searches you can do to find information about buyers and sellers, LinkedIn, Realtor.com, white pages, different social media accounts if they have them. And then chapter 4, it discusses psychology of rapport and building rapport. So there's a good example there on page 61. Talks about face-to-face rapport building, name recognition, mirroring, personality mirroring, talking about the person, making upfront concessions in the negotiation. And then there's a lot of tales from the trenches examples in this chapter as well, and quick tips to help you get started. When you cannot get face-to-face, there's some ways to build rapport there as well. It says to leave your ego at home, leverage their ego, and then keep building rapport throughout the negotiation. There is a quote at the end here. I won't read it, but there's another quick tip as well that I found valuable on page 74 and 75. Chapter 5, seller motivation and leverage. So information we're looking for is determining the seller source and level of motivation, determining the seller's minimum acceptable offer, finding additional leverage for our negotiation. So getting information directly from the seller, asking good questions. There's an example of the investor-seller relationship here on page 79 and 80. Determine motivating factors other than price. Listen to what they have to say and listen aggressively. Determine their motivation to work with you and determine property payoff amounts. That can help you in the negotiation. Asking more important questions, getting information from seller sources, talking to the listing agent, using MLS information, determining the property payoff amount again. In chapter 6, opening bid consideration. So discusses defining your target point and minimum acceptable offer. What does that mean? And then how to determine your target and minimum acceptable offer, writing it down, and then it gives you a target and example on page 95 and 96. So who offers first, having the other party make the first offer. You can define the midpoint. Their opening bid might be even better than yours. So there's a quick tip on page 99 about that. And then when you offer first on page 100, I circled pages 102 and 103 because this was a really cool one, I thought, avoiding round numbers in a bid. So a lot of people say like 100,000 or 150,000, but if you make it more specific, it can look more calculated and thought out. Non-round numbers are better at anchoring as well. We've heard this from other books. I believe in our FBI hostage negotiator book that I reviewed on this channel, he discusses this as well, this concept of anchoring with non-round numbers. And then non-round numbers also help you beat competition because a lot of people will go up to the next break point, but maybe not an odd number over the break point. So offer low, but not too low. There's a great quick tip here. The stronger the seller's motivation, the less likely you are to insult them with a low offer. The more motivated they are, the lower your initial offer should be. Hold back some concessions. The real estate contract, offering terms and contingencies. 6 major components to an offer is the price, earnest money deposit, the closing date, financing contingencies, and other terms. A lot of good overlap in that chapter with the offers. Chapter 7, your opening bid price. So opening bid price when working with sellers. It says step 1 is to create an minimum acceptable offer range. Show you a picture of what that looks like as well. Step 2 is to adjust the range. Step 3 is to make a best guess at the seller's minimum acceptable offer. And then step 4, compare the seller's minimum acceptable offer to your target. And then some great graphics again on 14, 15, and 17. It says you may only have one chance, so you want to do a really good job with that initial offer. And then if you have difficulty getting information from the seller, there's some tips there. Sales price to the listing agent ratio price, SPLP on page 121. I thought that was cool. Determining our opening bid price. He gives you step 1 example on page 122. It continues on throughout the rest of that chapter. On page 128, Chapter 8, it's all about terms and contingencies. So it talks about earnest money, closing date, financing, cash versus financing. So an all cash deal versus a finance purchase, and then making a cash offer on a finance purchase. Contingency examples, inspection, due diligence, contingency. Page 135 has some really cool stuff. It says, I circled this passage. All parties agree that buyer has the right to terminate this contract for any reason and with no penalty within 7 days following binding agreement, due diligence period. All parties further agree that should the buyer deliver notice of termination in writing to the seller prior to the expiration date of the due diligence period, earnest money shall be refunded to the buyer. So really good verbiage to include in a contract. Page 137 discusses the appraisal contingency. And then on 138, additional contingencies you can utilize as well. The book does suggest to use as few contingencies as possible to clean up the offer, but to use them effectively and constructively to protect yourself. Other terms in here discusses seller financing, quick closes, closing costs, closing agents, home warranties, and inspection reports. That concludes Chapter 8. In Chapter 9, delivering your offer. So make most offers in writing, use state or attorney approved contracts, keep offers as simple as possible. Again, to reiterate, best practices when dealing with the seller, always deal with the decision maker, oftentimes in deals. One party may or may not have all of the decision capabilities, and they give examples of what that looks like and how to talk to that person when you suspect that happens, presenting your offer and priming. Be confident, don't justify and listen, communicating in advance, and then lots of quick tips, best practices, timing of offers on listed properties. So it discusses some opportunities you can exploit. And then that's the end of Chapter 9. On Chapter 10, negotiating tactics. So planning your strategy up front, focus on things that both sides agree on. So there was a lot of verbiage in this book and in this chapter about talking about the terms that both parties agree on and how that can help push negotiations along when you're reiterating and going back to the drawing board. Friction is your friend. So introducing some level of friction can make the deal actually better by not making it too easy and the other person thinking you've pulled a fast one on them. So another Tales of the Trench in here that was really good on page 169. It says 171 to use experts. Don't lie. Keep your mouth shut. Don't interrupt. Appeal to a higher authority. Bluffing, take her to leave it. It goes into that style as well and what not to do. And then some best practices on how to deal with dealing with stalls in a negotiation. So I really like that. Probably the quote of all here in this book is no deal is better than a bad deal. I've heard that from multiple books I've reviewed on this channel. So great tip there. On Chapter 11, rules of concessions and concession strategies. This chapter is all about strategies for concessions. Really like this a lot. A lot of information here, but very good to review that chapter if you're unfamiliar with concessions and making them and offering them. Chapter 12 discusses defense and counter tactics, how to defend against lowball offers, defending against higher authority, and defending against people that lie or silence, defending against people that interrupt, tactical criticism, defending against threats of competition, and rejected offers. Very comprehensive chapter. Quick tip at the end on page 210. Chapter 13 is all about renegotiation principles. So what is renegotiation? Risk of overusing contingencies, common renegotiation resolutions. All of those are explained. And then when to ask for more, determining who should pay when the renegotiation happens due to any type of unforeseen expense that comes from the at the end of the inspection period. So Chapter 14, renegotiation scenarios. So this chapter is all about the different scenarios. I'll skip ahead here to Chapter 15, which is negotiating the sale. So agent versus for sale by owner, flat fee listing services, setting your list price price and terms, important terms for your sales contracts, multiple offer situations, negotiating one offer at a time. Talks about highest and best. You probably heard that with the seller's market that we had for the last year and a half or so, mixing the different techniques. And then at the very end, it discusses escalation clauses. So I really like that because that came into play when we were purchasing our home and our investment property. So good to be aware of different tactics sellers use as well as buyers when it comes to escalation clauses. So chapter 16 is all about buying from institutions. So REO properties or real estate owned properties, and how to basically work around with the financial institutions to make yourself competitive in offers. And then it talks about HUD foreclosures and how to bid there and what to do when submitting low offers on those properties, counter offers, inspections, etc. So final thoughts on page 263 just goes into a high level overview of everything discussed earlier in the book. Overall, I would say this one is I would score it an A. Very, very good book. I liked it. I enjoyed it. If you enjoyed today's book on negotiating real estate, please like, share, and subscribe. I will continue to review books on this channel in the business and real estate investing and mindset books. Hope you had a great holiday. Happy New Year. Bippity boppity investment property. Let's go.